Hey everyone, my name's Will Valida, and in this video we're going to be talking about service invocation in Dapr. Now, in many microservices architectures, multiple services will need to talk to each other. However, this can be a bit of a challenge when using microservices, as there's a few problems that we need to think about when dealing with inter-service communication. Questions like, how will I discover my different services with service discovery? How do I invoke methods between services and standardize API calls between services? How do I call other services securely with encryption and apply access control on those methods? How can I handle retries and transient errors? How do I mitigate request timeouts or failures? And how do I use tracing to see a call graph with metrics so I can diagnose issues when they arise in production? Now, what Dapr has is the Service Invocation API that helps address these problems. It acts similar to a reverse proxy with built-in service discovery, while also providing distributed tracing, encryption, metrics, and error handling. So let's take a look at the following diagram to see how service invocation works. Service A will make an HTTP or gRPC call that targets service B. The call will go to the Dapr sidecar, which discovers service B's location using name resolution. Now, Dapr will forward the message to service B's Dapr sidecar, and then the sidecar will forward that request to the specified endpoint or method on service B. Service B will then run that endpoint or method's business logic and then send a response to service A via service B's sidecar. Dapr will then forward that response to the sidecar of service A, which will then finally land in service A with the response. So let's take a look at a couple of services that talk to each other using service invocation to see how it works. Okay, so here I am in Visual Studio 2022. There are two applications that I'm going to focus on in this video. There's a weather processor and a weather generator. Now, our weather generator is just a very straightforward ASP.NET Core web API with a single endpoint. So this is using a minimal API, so there's no controllers there. So I've just got one single post endpoint to weather forecast that's essentially going to take an incoming weather forecast object and then write out some properties to the console and then return the weather forecast as a string. If I look at my CS proj file, there's nothing Dapr related installed on here. It's just a pure ASP.NET Core web API project. Very bare bones, nothing really to see here. Now, if I open up my weather generator, this is doing a little bit more of the heavy lifting. So if I look at the CS proj file, I've installed a dapr.client NuGet package. And in my program.cs file, I'm using that Dapr client to create an HTTP client. And I'm passing through an app ID of weather processor. So if I go back into my weather processor application, when I start this, I will give it an app ID of weather processor. And then when I start my generator application, I essentially create a fake or simulated weather forecast reading. And I'll pass that through as a post response to the weather forecast endpoint. So essentially, Dapr will use the weather processor app ID to do some service discovery and make sure that this request gets routed to the weather forecast in the weather processor application. I'll then print out a response from the command line, and we'll do that every second. We'll just add a bit of a delay there. So what I'm going to do now is open up a terminal, and I've got two terminals, one for the processor and one for the generator. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a little bit of real estate going here and run them side by side. So I'll start the weather processor. And this is the command I'm going to run. So remember we ran Dapr run in our previous video. I'm going to put this on port 5278. And to really explain this, if I go back into my weather processor and look at the launch settings, this will be the HTTP port that this application URL is configured on. You can do this for HTTPS instead, but for now I'll just use HTTP, and I'll pass through the app protocol of HTTP. I'll give it an app ID of weather processor, and I'll expose it on Dapr HTTP port 3501, and then I'll run the application. So let's run that. So my application is starting up, and the logs have started as well. So there we go. I've got my application running. So now I'm going to run another Dapr run command for my weather generator application. So there we are. So Dapr run, I'm giving it an app ID of weather generator using HTTP as my app protocol, but this time I'm exposing it on 3500, and then I'm going to run that application. So let me press enter. So my application is up and running. And there we go. I can see that some weather events or weather forecasts are being generated. And the response that I'm getting back is okay. So those two services are communicating to each other via service invocation. So as you can see, there's not much that I need to do to set up for it. I'm just going to go ahead and stop that. Now, if I go back to the commands that I ran and open up my weather generator application, I created an HTTP client and passed through the app ID of weather processor. So when the weather generator was able to make post requests, passing in this weather reading and hitting this weather endpoint, essentially the Dapr application, if I go back into my weather processor application, this was my weather processor app ID, and then this was the endpoint that it was hitting. So as you can see, I didn't really need to give Dapr much information to be able for these two services to talk to each other by service invocation. And there's really not much more to it. There's a lot more complicated scenarios that you can use for service invocation, but I'll cover that in a future video. For now, it was just important to cover the basics. This application really is doing a little bit of publish and subscribing work, and in Dapr there is a better way of doing this. So in our next video, we'll talk about the Dapr pub sub building block and how we can use that for pub and sub scenarios. So that wraps up this video. In this video, we learned how service invocation works in Dapr, and then we saw it in action by using two C# applications that were able to send and receive requests to each other using Dapr Service Invocation. In our next video, we'll take a look at pub sub building block and how that works in Dapr. So if you like this video, give it a like. If you have any questions on this video or Dapr in general, please ask in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe. No matter where you are in the world, I hope you're having a great day, and we'll see you all next time.